Social Media 101 for economic developers. R.T. Kutiala, Marketing Director for GIS Planning, will be presenting today's webinar. Ms. Kutiala brings over a decade of technology and marketing experience with a focus on online advertising and social media, and has significant experience leading community management initiatives across various social networks. RT has also worked for the United States Chamber of Commerce and the San Francisco Global Trade Council. She co-authored the book Regional Wealth Creation in the Innovation Economy, where she interviewed senior government and leading industry executives on success factors for creating wealth in the innovation economy. RT has an MBA from San Francisco State University and is a passionate social media and end-user advocate.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us on this webinar on maximizing your success with social media. Before I get started, I wanted to orient this presentation to your needs. Based on earlier polls and emails from some of you, many of you have indicated that you're still slightly confused about all the different social media terms, and frankly, some of you are not entirely convinced of the value of investing your time into technologies like Twitter that may possibly be obsolete a year from now. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what exactly social media is so that I can help demystify some of the buzzwords around the concepts, and then talk about why social media matters to you and hopefully provide you with hard statistics that convince you of the critical value of social media for your job as a economic developer, and also to arm you with data to convince upper management within your own organization so that you can dispel concerns and hopefully get them to invest more in this new medium. We'll talk a little bit about how to get started and how to think about things before you get started so that you can set yourself up for success. And finally, we will jump into what other economic developers are already doing to leverage these technologies and measure their success. If you have any specific questions, certainly feel free to email me afterwards, and I will be very happy to get into any of the specific concerns that you may have. So to begin with, in terms of what social media means, it's very important to realize that social media is just another platform for communication and relationship building along the evolution of media. We all remember the one-way broadcast systems of TV and newspapers, which eventually evolved into the Web 2.0 model with blogs and comments, where people were essentially starting to talk back. Social media is just another extension of that model where increasingly people have more control. It's much more user-driven and highly opt-in, and the conversations are increasingly shorter and more real-time. What one of the terminologies that's referring to that is called micro-sharing or micro-blogging. The thing to remember is that whatever happens with these technologies, social media is going to continue to evolve, and the communication around social media is going to continue to evolve. And the core principles of social media are going to remain no matter what happens with the technologies. So just like with email, for example, we had to learn how to engage on the medium of email and to do email marketing. We also similarly need to learn and understand how to engage people on social media. So how is this relevant to your work as an economic developer? It's very simple. The reason that this is very important for your work as an economic developer is because this is where your customers are spending their time and where their customers are spending their time. And studies have shown that consumers expect marketers to engage them on these social media platforms primarily because the conversation is happening on their own terms. And one of the most important core value propositions about social media is that if you don't have anything valuable to say, then people will simply not engage. So here I'm going to provide you with some statistics that talk a little bit about why you should be engaging on social media and what the growth and momentum is behind this new medium. As you can see here, this research from Forrester shows that over 55 million US adults visit social media networking sites every month. This study was done a few months ago, and I would guarantee that the number has easily exceeded 60 million, if not more. But more specifically, LinkedIn already has over 50 million users, with a new member joining every second of every day. Facebook already has 300 million users and is growing at the rate of 800,000 new users a day. I'd like you to think about this for a minute. What this means is that all of the business owners that you are trying to reach and attract into your community are on social media properties, and specifically they are on Facebook. What's even more important is that these social networking environments are working very hard to establish existing relationships that you may not know about. You may be familiar with the example of LinkedIn, where, for example, I know that I have a lot of people that contact me for somebody within my network, potentially for a job, or because they want to hire them. Facebook is going to take it to the next level by helping to analyze your network and show you where your professional and personal relationships intersect. So to give you an example, if you think of a scenario, you may have a friend who perhaps owes you a favor. And Facebook can help surface that they happen to work with the CEO of the very business that you've been trying to attract into your community for the past few months. Or maybe they went to high school with them. As Facebook surfaces these connections, you can pay attention to these connections and really cut through some of the issues that we face today, where we really don't have access to people or an understanding of the kind of relationships that may be available for us. Now you may be asking yourself, how is this relevant to your work as an economic developer? And the reason is very simple. This is where your customers and their customers are spending their time. And studies show that consumers actually expect marketers to join the conversation on these different social media properties, primarily because it's on their terms. And this is a very important principle of social media, which is that if you don't have anything valuable to say as a marketer, your customers will simply not engage with you. Now I'd like to provide you with some hard statistics about social media and its growth. A recent study by Forrester showed that over 55 million US adults visit social networking sites every month. This study was only a couple of months old, but I could guarantee that that number has probably already exceeded over 60 million, if not more. But more specifically, LinkedIn has over 50 million users, and a new member joins LinkedIn every second. Facebook already has 300 million users, with 800,000 new users growing every day. I'd like you to think about that for a minute. What this means is that all of the business owners that you are trying to reach are already on there. What's even more important, these social networking environments work very hard to establish existing relationships that you may not know about. So you may be familiar with the idea on LinkedIn where you may have people contact you, for an introduction with somebody within your network, either for a job that they're interested in or perhaps for hiring them. Facebook will take it to a new level where they analyze your entire social graph for relationships or interrelationships between your professional and personal network. So what that means is that if you take a following scenario, for example, let's say that you have a friend who maybe owes you a favor, and you can see that on Facebook, you can see that they happen to actually work with the CEO of a business that you've been trying to attract within your community. Or maybe they went to high school with them. As Facebook surfaces these connections, and if you pay careful attention, you'll be able to cut through some of the issues that we have today where you really don't have access to relationships with these people. And that's a very critical value proposition of social media. Going back to the growth, Twitter, for example, has had a 2,000% growth in the last year, and we will continue to see very exciting things from Twitter. My second point is that social networking is actually becoming more popular than email, where a recent study by Nielsen Online showed that over 66% of internet users have already have used social networks to do their communication versus only 65%. Although the numbers are not very different, what this means is that if you're solely targeting your communication to email marketing, then you may be wasting your time because a lot more people are going onto Facebook or LinkedIn to communicate with each other. And so it's very important that you're targeting your marketing efforts accordingly. My third point is that social media is really not a kid's playground anymore. I think that's one of the most important misconceptions about social media, which is, people think that it's about teenagers wasting their time poking each other on Facebook, for example. That's actually no longer true. LinkedIn already has executive members from all Fortune 500 companies, and Facebook, as you saw, they're growing very quickly, but even more interesting, their fastest growing demographic is over the age of 35, and Twitter, in fact, their fastest growing demographic is even older at the age of 45 to 55 years old. So what this means for you is that the value proposition is that it's already mainstream. Everybody's on it, and it's not just kids. Businesses and economic developers are already establishing relationships on these social media properties, and I'll show you examples, specific examples of that. What's more, social media is one of the best ways to find out what other people are saying. It's a great tool for market intelligence, and the fact is that people are already having very frank and very public conversations about your community. If these conversations are positive, you really want to be in on those conversations because essentially these are people that you can connect with and really promote their conversations and turn them into official brand ambassadors for you for free. But even more importantly, if the conversations are negative, it's that much more imperative for you to be part of that conversation. And one of my personal favorite examples of that is my own experience with Comcast. I had recently moved and I got disconnected for my service through no fault of mine. And after getting hung up on by numerous customer service representatives, I got on Twitter and ranted about it. And within minutes, Comcast Melissa got in touch with me and asked me what it was that she could do to help me and, whether there was anything that could be done to resolve the issue. Now, even before the issue got resolved, Comcast was able to take a very free tool and use that to connect with a customer that was on the verge of disconnecting their service with them. I mean, I was ready to find an alternative provider. And within minutes, they were able to calm me down and make me feel heard and respected as a human being. And I ended up keeping my contact with Comcast. And that's a really good example of how companies are reaching out to their customers and making sure that they're connecting with them, not only in terms of positive conversations, but especially if the customers are unhappy. The third point is that we all know word of mouth is the most effective form of marketing, and social media is essentially word of mouth on steroids. With the technology tools that are available today, conversations can proliferate automatically across all these different networks. So if I want to, I can link my Twitter account with my Facebook account and now with my LinkedIn account, so that whatever I say on Twitter is automatically proliferated across all of these different social networks. So what that means is that if I, had my LinkedIn and Facebook account connected with Twitter, then my rant on Comcast would have been communicated with not only the people that are following me on Twitter, but also my Facebook and LinkedIn networks. And so word of mouth really is growing exponentially with the tools that are available through social media. What's more, social content is actually something that ranks very high on search engines because it changes so frequently and it's linked to so often. So what that means is that if your customers are talking about you, then people who are, it's not just people who are, they're part of their network on different social media properties, but people who are not following you or not part of those networks are actually hearing about you when they Google you. And so it's very important, again, to make sure that these conversations are something that you're involved in. In fact, recent developments have made this even more important. Twitter recently announced a search partnership with both Google and Microsoft Bing, and Bing, in fact, is partnering with Facebook, which means that now Google will be instantly showing real-time results of what is being said about your community, whether you participate or not. In fact, Google also recently announced a new product called their Google Social Search product, which is designed to improve the search relevance, the results, search results relevance by showing public content from your social network. So this essentially is saying that the scenario that I talked about, where you may find out that you have a friend on Facebook that is a really good friend with a CEO of a company that you're interested in, this scenario is about to come true. This scenario is about to become very real. So all of this really means that your impact on search results about your community has just increased dramatically. And if you're not participating in these conversations, then you not only lose out on the conversations that are happening that may be negative, but you also lose out on the opportunity to have a real impact on proliferating good conversations about your community. Next, I'd like to show you an example of somebody at Sonoma County who's already taking advantage of these new technologies to reach out to their customers and actually measure results.
Many of us ask, okay, I'm on social media, but how do I persuade my bosses that social media is actually working? How do I track it? Well, I'm sitting here with Carrie Hansen, who is the PR and marketing person for the Sonoma County Tourism Bureau. Carrie, thanks for coming today. Now, I know you've done a lot of tracking. Can you tell our audience, what is it that you've done that you can in turn take to your boss and say, hey, this works?
We're funded by a hotel room night tax. So my goal, everything that I do has to bring people to Sonoma County to spend the night. So when we have a special offer from a hotel or a lodging property, and I will post it to our blog inside sonoma.com, and then I'll send a tweet about it. And our blog is based in WordPress. So I can go in right away and see how many people from Twitter are viewing the blog post. From there, I can then track how many of those people actually went to book the room night package on our booking engine. So for ROI, I can show that my 30 seconds of time to go from tweeting the special to, tracking the booking resulted in XYZ room nights booked. And sometimes it's not instantaneous, but I will go back, a week or 2 weeks later and actually check to see if people booked from the tweet. And it shows real value. You're getting straight to the consumer. There's no middle person. They're Googling, Sonoma County hotels, Sonoma County specials, finding the blog post, booking a room night, and everybody's happy.
We hear a lot these days about driving traffic to your Facebook page using free offers. Have you done that at Sonoma County, and how's that going for you?
Facebook is totally revamping their pages, their fan pages, and their friend home page. So we have both. We have a fan page and a friend page for Sonoma County, California. And on the fan page, there'll be this really cool new way where you can update people that are following you without sending them a message. And so we have a big plan to engage people into a conversation. Yesterday, a winery in Sonoma County sent me a Facebook invite to an event that included 50% off of a hotel. I shared it to my page, and then I tweeted about it, and I had 12 people book right away the hotel for the big wine tasting weekend coming up this weekend. And so instantaneously I could show that her sending me the message, me sending it on Twitter, actually made people go out and book because it was such a great deal, and it actually got me more followers on Twitter for people looking for insider secrets, hot deals, stuff that you wouldn't find out unless you were following us.
If you could think of one or two things that are the biggest takeaways that you could give to our audience about social media.
So I'm going to stop here and let you follow the rest of the conversation through the link in my presentation, which I will be making available to you. But what I really wanted to point out here is that this is already real, and economic developers are already using these new technologies very aggressively to meet the needs of their marketing efforts and to really track them in a way that they can show measurable results. So if we agree that it's critical to engage with your customers on these social media properties, then how do you get started? Before you jump on the social media bandwagon, I think it's very important to understand and realize that you do not have to start at the most complex level, what I call nesters, with people that are seeding and building communities. It's actually much smarter to start at the lower end, just like consumers do in terms of their engagement. So what you do is that you start listening as a spectator. You start monitoring and listening to what people are saying about your community, if there's any mentions about your community. And as you start to hear more about your community, then you can start engaging in those conversations. So for example, if somebody asks you a question, then you can answer that question about your community. Or if somebody, if you have some content, then you can start putting that out to your network. If you see people are talking about your community, you can follow them and engage with them. And that's really the best way to grow your social network organically. So I'm going to provide you with my 4-step plan to becoming a social media Jedi. I think the most important place to start is by listening, which is essentially marketing 101. It's very important to start by understanding who your audience is and where they're actually engaging, what social media properties they're really spending their time on. If everyone within your community is primarily on Facebook, then you don't really want to spend too much time on Twitter. You may want to set up an account to make sure that you're proactively monitoring any conversations that may occur, but then you want to focus your efforts primarily on Facebook if that's where people are really engaging in conversations. Another point would be that if you want to pay attention to what your audience is doing. If they're creating content, then your social media strategy would be different, because then you would be actively promoting that content, versus if your audience is primarily spectators where they're not really talking very much but they're present on these social media properties, then your strategy would be to provide them with content and make them engage in that content by providing them with actionable things that they can do, like promotions or other things that may be relevant to them. And what you really want to do is you want to establish your baseline social footprint through what I call key conversation indices. And this is the core piece that you want to start with in an effort to really measure your success with social media. It's very important to track where you are at level 0, and then monitor the changes that you see based on the efforts that you make. So for example, you would want to start with tracking how many times your community is being talked about, how many mentions are there on Twitter or on Facebook. And if there's conversations that are happening, you want to do some sentiment analysis of whether these conversations are positive or negative. And there's some free tools that I'll talk about that can help you do that. And similarly, you want to track, if you have if you're on Facebook, do you have fans? How many do you have to begin with? If you have a YouTube account, how many times are people favoriting your content, or how many times are they sharing your content? And you also want to be tracking any potential for red flags before they actually flare up. And once you have that baseline social footprint, it'll be much easier for you to see if your efforts are paying off. The next thing you want to do in terms of listening is that you want to benchmark your industry. You want to start connecting with any of your business customers that are out there on these social media properties. If you know people individually, find them on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or even on Twitter. If you know that you can do searches for businesses within your community and see if they have Twitter accounts. You want to connect with them. They're a relevant portion of your audience. And similarly, you want to find partner organizations and connect with them, and even colleagues on LinkedIn or other environments. And really start to look at what other communities are doing with social media. There's some great examples, some of which I'll go into, but there's some great examples of what communities are doing to proactively reach out to their constituents. And the main thing to keep in mind as you start listening to these conversations is that the name of the game is social capital. Social media is really characterized by win-win frames of mind, where people are really trying to promote each other and have a win-win scenario where everybody gets something valuable. Each social media property has its own etiquette, and it's very important to respect those different etiquettes. Here I'd like to give you a couple of examples of listening tools that I think are really great. I think search.twitter.com is a great place to start, where you can start looking for mentions of your community. So if you have a Twitter account and you're not really sure exactly where to start, then one of the things that you can do is you can put in the name of your community and some relevant keywords. For example, here I have Arlington plus commercial real estate. And you can see if there's any conversations that are occurring. So for example, if I was Arlington, I would be very interested in Real Estate 56 because they are talking about my community and they're talking about commercial real estate. So what I would do is I would follow them and then see if there's relevant value that they can provide to this individual. Here's another great tool called twens.com. What Twens does is that it evaluates up to 70 tweets at a time to provide you with real-time sentiment analysis. So for example, here I had put in a search for Atlanta, Georgia, and in real time it started to track all of the conversations that were happening. You can see these were, just 3 minutes ago. And what it does is that it gives you an analysis of whether these conversations are positive, which are green, or neutral, or if they were negative, they would be in red. Now, this is a programmatic way of analyzing conversations, and it's not exactly or not always correct, but it's a great tool to supplement your own analysis so that you're not overwhelmed with trying to read all of these tweets at the same time. If you suddenly saw red here, you may want to jump into those tweets and see, whether those conversations are really something to worry about. After you've defined your social footprint for these across these different social media properties, your next step is to define your goals. You should really define what it is that you're trying to achieve out of your social media efforts. So let's say that you're trying to attract new businesses into your community. You should break that down into sub-goals. For example, maybe to increase awareness about your community, or there may be specific initiatives that can help businesses save money. This is real value for businesses, and your goal should be to create awareness about these initiatives. You might have found that when you did that baseline footprint, that the customer sentiment about your community is neutral or maybe even negative, and your effort is going to be to improve that customer sentiment. You may also try to provide accurate data on sites and buildings that are available within your community. GIS planning offers a service that is free to both economic developers and businesses that are looking to relocate. And what it does is that it has updated information on available properties in the communities where we have information for that. And if your community is covered, you should take advantage of that and use that to promote the properties in your community. Alternatively, if you're trying to retain existing businesses within your community, your goal may be to establish connections with these businesses. Twitter has some amazing examples of small, medium businesses that are reaching out to their customers in a way that they've never had access before, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those examples. Your goal may also be to keep a tab on existing business health. You may want to reach out to your businesses and see how they're doing. Maybe they're already talking about that, or maybe you can reach out and ask them about that. You can also try to educate small, medium businesses on the value of the internet or the value of social media for their own success. And finally, if you're trying to enable business expansion of existing businesses within your community, you might want to provide targeted incentives that you can really tailor based on the information that you have about your community, the businesses in your community. Or you may be wanting to provide access to tools and resources that are available for them and they may not know about. The third thing you want to do once you've established those goals is that you want to jump in on that conversation. And it's very important to be open and honest and authentic. And what that means is that, just like you do with your other marketing efforts, you want to respect the tone of your organization, but you want to balance that out with a human voice. For example, it's perfectly acceptable to talk about your love for the opera, especially if there's an upcoming event that you can link that to. That just makes the conversation more real and it makes it more human. And it definitely brings out a much better result. You want to also make sure to provide value. If people are asking questions about your community, then you want to try to answer those questions. That's real value. You can also integrate social media into your GIS website if you have one, and I'll show you examples of how we are providing that for our customers as a free value add service, where essentially what it's doing is that it's allowing our customers to enable their users to share any of the information available on their website with their own social networks, and I'll definitely jump into some examples with that. You may want to solicit feedback. For example, you can ask questions. There's a lot of free poll tools that you can use to get some real answers. And you can also do what they call tweet-ups, which is essentially meetups, live in-person meetups with people on your Twitter account. And you can invite suggestions. You may not know exactly where to begin with these conversations, and you can just simply show up and say, we want to provide you with better support. What can we do? And you may be surprised by the kind of response that you get. What's really important is that you develop an ongoing interactive discussion with your community. You want to engage them, you want to foster ambassadors, and you want to be very consistent in your efforts. It's completely acceptable for you to engage once a week or once every couple of weeks, but if you just like you would in your emails, marketing emails, or with your blog posts, you want to be very consistent in that communication. And then finally, what you want to do is that you want to measure the progress via changes in these key conversation indices. So for example, if we go back to our specific goals for attracting new business, if you're trying to increase the awareness of your community, then you want to track whether there were more mentions of your community, for example, on Twitter, where people talking more about your community because of things that you did or efforts that you took. If you're trying to highlight economic initiatives, you might want to look at whether people are passing that along. Are they sharing that? Are they tweeting that? Are they retweeting that information? Because if they are doing that, then they're showing a level of engagement. If you're trying to improve customer sentiment, then you can benchmark that sentiment analysis so that before you made any efforts, you can look at where that baseline social footprint was, and then after a month of trying to improve customer sentiment, then you can look at whether that's gone in the direction that you want it to. And similarly, if you're trying to provide accurate data on sites and properties, let's say that you're sharing a lot of the information from zoomprospector.com, then you want to look at whether people are retweeting that, or whether people are saying thank you, or showing some positive reactions to that. If you're trying to retain existing businesses, let's say that you've decided to establish some connections with local businesses, then you can look at whether you have an increase in the number of followers and whether those, what proportion of those followers are local businesses. And you can also look for whether you're seeing a cross-proliferation of relationships. So you may have people on LinkedIn that are now connecting with you on Facebook, or that are now connecting with you on Twitter. And that shows an increased level of engagement, where people are saying that they want to be interacting with you in all of these different properties. If you're trying to keep a tab on existing business health, then you can track the number of issues and needs that they are identifying and validate that through polls. If you're trying to educate small, medium businesses, then you can do event-specific promotions, or I'm sorry, channel-specific promotions for specific events. And you can look at how many people are actually attending these different events. So for example, if you promoted something only on Facebook, then you can look at how many people showed up, and you know that that channel was very effective for you. And similarly, if you're trying to encourage new businesses to get online or get on Twitter, then you can track how many more you have every month or every 6 months. And in terms of enabling business expansion, if you're trying to provide targeted incentives, then you want to look at whether those businesses that match the criteria of the incentives that you're sharing, are they passing that information along? Are they coming in for, to take advantage of those incentives? Are they, again, like I would certainly try to do channel-specific promotions where if you're promoting a specific incentive on Twitter, then you can see how effective that is. And if you're providing access to tools and resources, you may want to you want to see if they're linking to your business services, if they're signing up for your webinars or for any of the free services that you or your partner organizations are providing. So now I'm going to jump into some of the best practices by economic developers in what they're doing across these different social media properties. We all know that the White House is very aggressive with social media, and here's an example of what they're doing. They're making a lot of their presentations available in the Open Government Initiative on SlideShare. So people can actually download slide presentations from the White House. I have an example of Santa Cruz, which Santa Cruz City is engaging in an interactive social media strategy where they're inviting residents to join in on the conversation on resolving the city's budget crisis. So you can see here they're providing a complete breakdown of how they're spending their money, and here they're asking for them to engage in these conversations, to give them feedback and to give them suggestions. This is a very active way and very low-cost way to actually engage with their constituents. Twitter is a great example of how companies and economic developers are giving their brand a human voice. So, here's an example of how people are generating social capital through retweets. For example, somebody retweeted a tweet by Inc. magazine that's promoting the value of Zoom Prospector and saying that it's an amazing site. For us, that was a great post, and we obviously retweeted that and got that out to our network so they could see that other people think that this is a great site. And that's a great way to generate good feelings about the organizations that you actually support. Here's some examples of how local small, medium businesses are engaging with their end customers. Here's a number of taco trucks that are actually reaching out to their customers and asking for very specific advice. So for example, Green DC is asking for a good place to park. Now, if you're following them, and you know of a good place to park, then you've just given them valuable input that will help them do their business better. Or here, for example, Waffle Truck is doing a Twitter-specific promotion where they're providing a password that is only being promoted on Twitter so that they can see how they're doing in terms of how many people are actually coming to them with this password. I know that personally there's, I have local businesses within my community that I'm following, and it's really exciting to see them provide promotions that I can literally go down and take advantage of in person. LinkedIn is another great social media property where businesses and economic developers are extremely active. You're probably very familiar with some of the functions that are available on LinkedIn, but some other ways of really generating social capital is to provide introductions. So if you know that somebody's looking for a specific kind of talent, then you can make that introduction if you know of somebody within your network, and you've just generated some great value for that person in your network. Or you can provide recommendations for people that you think are doing a great job of, whatever their role is. One of the greatest ways to really expand your network is to jump into group discussions. So for example, here's a group that GIS Planning has put together called Economic Development Leadership, where we're really having a lot of conversations about social media and viral marketing, and people are really actively engaged in these conversations and the value proposition for economic developers. It's a great way to learn about things, and it's a great way to expand your existing network. There's also some really good applications that are available on LinkedIn. For example, Company Buzz is an application that you can put into LinkedIn that aggregates all of the information that, or all of the conversations that are occurring on Twitter directly within LinkedIn, so that other people can see what conversations are happening about your company within LinkedIn without having to go to Twitter. And Twitter recently integrated their account with LinkedIn, so now whatever people are saying, if you want, you can have your Twitter conversations show up as a status update in your LinkedIn account. Facebook, I think, is one of the most important areas to watch for. The Facebook fan pages are a great way to communicate directly with your local community. San Francisco here, for example, the city and county of San Francisco is providing all of their contact information, and you can see they have a great number of followers. They have 267,000 people that are following them, and these two people are actually friends of mine. And for me as a resident of San Francisco, this is a really great way for me to keep in touch with the developments of my city. And you can see here, there's hundreds of people that are actively engaging, and they're talking about the things that matter to them. And this is a great way for cities and counties to actually solicit feedback about some of their initiatives. Here's some more examples. Grow Nebraska, for example, has integrated their YouTube feed directly into Facebook, and you can see here this person, Katrina Frey, who's obviously works with Heavenly Creations Jelly, that was obviously featured within this video, suddenly had a way to respond back and say that they were featured in it, and this is great. And everybody within Katrina's network is now going to be able to see that their company was featured in this video that is being promoted by their community. It's just a really tremendous way to get the word out. Rockford has a very interesting strategy where they, instead of having just the organization, they have identified a person that is representing some of the events that are occurring in their region. So for example, here Stacy is showing you what her top picks are for the weekend. And that's a really great way to reach out to the community and engage them so that they look to you for this kind of information. And Michigan Main Street here has integrated their blog into their Facebook effort, so that every time they have a blog, they are posting that here and really proliferating the reach of their blog across this social network. So there's some, couple of examples of how economic developers are leveraging these environments. Here's a really great example of an organization called Sprinkles Cupcakes, where the president talks about their community. They say, on Facebook, we can ask our customer what's the next location they want. It's an amazing way to communicate with our fans. Now, if I was an economic developer in Beverly Hills, I would be extremely excited about this conversation, and I would certainly keep tabs on what the customers is saying about their next location decision, and I would reach out directly to Sprinkles Cupcakes to find out if they're thinking about expanding and what you can do to help them make that decision. And so there's all this hidden value in all of these conversations that really are starting to surface if you just pay attention to them. You can also directly integrate social media into your own website. So for example, GIS Planning provides this free value to our customers where we integrate social media components within their own websites. So what this means is that if I am a resident of Greater Waco area in Texas, and I go to the Greater Waco Chamber website and I see a property that I'm really interested in, I can now share this information with anybody within any of my social networks. So I can click on this LinkedIn button and I can share this property with anybody within my LinkedIn profile. And similarly, I can tweet about it so that everybody within my Twitter network can see that I think this is a great property in Waco, Texas. And you can do the same thing with Facebook so that as a user I can either post it to my profile and share it with my entire network, or I can send it to a specific person who may be interested in this property because I know that they're looking for an expanding business that's looking for a new property. And so this is another way that you can really get creative in terms of enabling your own users to run with the information that you already provide on your on your own website already. GIS Planning is also offering a free community connection page to all economic developers where essentially what you can do is you can aggregate all of your different social media properties into a single personalized calling card to showcase your community. Really what this is a social network for economic developers where you can aggregate all of this information so that your users have one place to go where they can check to see what's happening with their community. So rather than having to go to, here we have an example for Metro Denver, rather than having to go to the Metro Denver Twitter account and the LinkedIn account or Facebook or YouTube, what we're doing is we're allowing Metro Denver to aggregate all of that information into one place so that I as a user can see what's happening in this one page. So for example, every time Metro Denver updates their Twitter account, this page automatically updates all of that information into one place. And what we're doing is that we're aggregating all these different information so that it's providing a very robust perspective of the community that's different from anything else out there in the market. So here, for example, we're aggregating information about the jobs that are available currently in your community or your Twitter feed or YouTube content and contact information. Really what this is a one-stop shop for your constituents to get all of your social media updates for free. And I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like.
Your Community Connection page is a free service from ZoomProspector.com to help you showcase your community to businesses while at the same time highlighting the services of your organization. ZoomProspector.com puts economic developers right out in front of businesses performing a site selection search. Businesses can search for your organization by region, type of organization, and contact person. If your organization meets their search criteria, they will see a link to your Community Connection page with a brief summary. Your page will show the information that you choose to share about your organization, including contact information and links out to your organization's different properties on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, all in one place. Below, your page will show outside content that is fed directly onto the page in real time. Users can browse up-to-the-minute job openings for your community. If you have a Twitter account, all your tweets are automatically updated on this page, allowing you to communicate timely information on local news and events from this one page. Users can also automatically access news clips and other video segments that you upload to your YouTube account. You can also add any combination of pictures, links, and text that tell the story of your community, and upload documents that will help businesses better understand your community and your organization. The Community Connection page on ZoomProspector.com is a powerful marketing tool for your community, aggregating all the work you do on other social media sites into one page for your users. Sign up now for your free account.
So in terms of takeaways, it's very important to recognize that social media marketing is here to stay. The technologies may change over time, but you need to understand how to market to your customers on social media, just like we learned how to market on email. Social media provides you with unprecedented access to your customers in a way that's never been possible before. But it's only possible and successful in a way where you're respecting their terms, which means that you have to learn how to listen, participate, and be real with them and provide real value to your customer base. It's important to identify key conversation indices to establish a baseline social footprint before you join in on the conversation for social media. And then once you jump in, you need to experiment and measure results along the way to make sure that you're actually tracking in the direction that you want to. Don't underestimate the importance of social capital. There's a variety of different ways to do that across all of these different social networking environments, and you should absolutely be trying to generate as much value as you can for your entire audience. And finally, make sure to leverage the free resources that are available to you from the third-party resources, tools that I talked about like Twens, as well as the free resources that GIS Planning provides, like zoomprospector.com for sites and building data, up-to-date sites and building data, and then community connection pages to aggregate all of your social media properties in one place. And make sure to enjoy the process. Social media is evolving rapidly and people are learning as they go. You should experiment, see what's working for your organization, and build upon the results. As I'd mentioned earlier, here's a list of sources for some of the stats that I used in my presentation. I've also included some additional resources that can really help you make a case for social media within your own organization. Now I'm going to move on to the question and answer section of this presentation. Let me see. The first question I have here is, my organization doesn't allow access to social networks at work. What should I do? You know, this is a very common issue in government entities. There's three things that I would recommend. First of all, start by building a case. Leverage the statistics in this presentation to create an ROI proposition. If you have any specific questions or would like any help with your strategy, please feel free to ping me and I would be very happy to provide any help that I can. But the second thing you need to do is that you need to start engaging your IT department and understand their issues. There's a lot of documentations published by the government that recommend best practices for social media policy in government. You know, and you can leverage these to start to provide them with ways to think about social media and to show them how other government type entities are addressing some of the same issues. And finally, what I would say is that don't wait for your organization to get on board. You are a brand unto yourself and need to create an account on every one of these social media properties to become relevant and to stay relevant. You know, in a way, these accounts that you have on these social media properties are going to be the resume of the future, and you need to have a presence there. And from the perspective of your job, at the very least, this will help you start monitoring what's going on in your industry and in your region. The next question that I have is, I don't know where to start. How do I make time for this on top of my own workload? I appreciate that question. It's something that I get quite often, and in fact it's something that I try to manage for myself as well. I think it's very easy to get overwhelmed. It's very important to keep in mind that you don't have to know and do everything. There are some great online resources that can walk you through the process of setting up an account and even maximizing your time for efficiency. There's a lot of online tools like the ones that I showed that can help you manage your time on social media properties. Specifically, you know, there's tools that can help you aggregate your search results so you don't have to look in different areas. Tools like FriendFeed. And then there's also tools that help you manage various Twitter accounts like Seismic. Feel free to ping me for specific questions and I'd be happy to point you to the relevant tools. The final thing I would say on this is that you need to understand that these are not necessarily additional tasks, but improved ways to do the very things that you're trying to do, which is get access to local businesses and build relationships with them. So the way that you want to think about this is, how can you integrate these tools into your current marketing plan? I think I have time for one more question. Should I create a company account or one of my own? How personal should I get, and can I get fired for things that I say? This is a very crucial policy decision that you need to make with your organization. The internet is full of examples of people getting fired for writing inappropriate things. But, there's a basic common sense that you already apply for emails that you send. This is no different. There's some basic guidelines, but it's important to respect the culture of your organization and find a way to be authentic and real at the same time. There are some great examples of social media policies for organizations out there. Again, I would be very happy to point you to some, but it's, keep in mind that your policy is going to be very unique to your own needs and to the needs of your organization. What you need to do is personalize these social media policies that already exist and try to represent what's important to the culture of your organization, and then make sure that it's communicated company-wide so that everybody's on board. In terms of which accounts to create, there's different ways to go about it. I think I showed some examples where, some economic development organizations speak as an entity, and others, leverage the name of a specific person and have a very human voice that way. There are organizations that have a single public voice where multiple people contribute, and there's organizations that have a single person that's dedicated but not really reflected as a person. They just are reflected as a organization. There are pros and cons to each of these approaches, and you have to evaluate not only how much time you have, but what your culture within your organization will enable. At GIS Planning, for example, we have an official Twitter account for Zoom Prospector, and we supplement that by a new account that I recently created, and I use that account to provide more tools that are a little bit off topic. They're more about technology, they're about social media, so they're a little bit broader topic, but it really complements the needs of my audience. And also we use both of these accounts to work together so that we're promoting content where it makes sense, where I, as marketing director at GIS Planning, can talk about things in a certain voice, and Zoom Prospector has a very different voice. And we're experimenting and seeing what works, which is really the way to go about it. So that's all the time that I have for questions. Again, if you have any other questions that weren't addressed here, please feel free to contact me. You can also find me on Twitter and LinkedIn and all of these other accounts. I hope to find you online and connect with you on some of these properties. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.